Bradley also identified groups like South languages, Central languages, Northeastern, and Southeastern groups. It's fascinating how these classifications reveal the linguistic diversity and connections among these regions.
Indeed, understanding the classification and relationships of these languages provides deeper insights into the cultural and historical contexts of the people who speak them.
Hey, have you ever studied the Sino-Tibetan languages? It's such a vast and diverse language family.
Yes, it's fascinating. The Sino-Tibetan language family includes a huge variety of languages. One of the major groups within this family is the Tibeto-Burman languages.
Exactly. The Tibeto-Burman group itself includes numerous languages, such as Tibetan and Burmese. The Burmese group of languages, for example, has about 32 million speakers spread across Burma, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and southwest China.
Speaking of different groups, the Thai languages are also interesting. Although they are sometimes considered separate, they share many similarities with the Sino-Tibetan languages in terms of vocabulary and typological features.
Yes, the works of Jean Prelutsky were quite pivotal in this area. He introduced the term Sino-Tibetan to include all three families, Sino-Tibetan, Tibeto-Burman, and the Thai group of languages. His division of these families provides a clearer understanding of their relationships.
Indeed, and the Tibetan group of languages spans a vast area, including the Tibetan Plateau and neighboring regions like Baltistan, Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, and Bhutan. These areas are incredibly diverse in terms of both scenery and linguistic variety.
The Tibeto-Burman languages are particularly interesting because they are spoken widely across different regions, from the West Himalayas to the highlands of northern Burma and northeast India. In the West Himalayas, you find languages like Tamang, Kiranti, and Nuer, Magaric, and Lepcha in central and eastern Nepal.
Yes, and northern Burma is home to languages like Jingpo, which is part of the Nungish group. This region, from northern Burma to northeast India, is rich in linguistic diversity.
Don't forget about the Brahmaputra or South languages. These include languages like Bodo Kutch and Konyak, which are spoken in northern Burma, Nagaland, Meghalaya, and Tripura. The borders of Nagaland and Manipur also have languages like Ao, Angami Poshuri, Tangkhul, and Zamkarbi.
Manipur itself is fascinating linguistically. The main language is Meitei, but there are also Kuki-Chin languages and others spoken in Mizoram and the Mru language in the Chittagong Hills of Bangladesh.
Yes, and the classification of these languages has been extensively studied. Robert Schaefer and Paul Benedict made significant contributions. Schaefer's work included classifying Chinese within the Sino-Tibetan family, and despite some disagreements, Benedict joined him to refine the classification of the Tibeto-Burman group.
Benedict and Schaefer's classification divided Sino-Tibetan into Chinese and Tibeto-Karen, with the latter including Karen and Tibeto-Burman. Tibeto-Burman was further divided into 7 branches, including the Tibetan Kanuri group, which itself splits into Bodish and Himalayish languages.
Bodish languages include Tibetan, Jirung, Takpa, Tsangla, Mormi, and Gurung. Himalayish is further divided into major and minor groups. Major Himalayish languages include Rankas, Dharmiya, Chodangsi, and Biangsi, while minor Himalayish includes Dorgai, Lepcha, and Magari.
Another branch is Bahingbu, which splits into subgroups like Bahing with Sunware and Kaling, Kembu with languages like Sampang and Limbu, and Vaishapang with Nuer. The Abermiridfla group includes languages like Aka, Digaro, Miju, and Dimil.
The Kashin group includes Luish, and the Burmese Lolo group is also significant. The Bodo-Garo, aka Barish, group includes languages like Naked Naga and aka Konyak, while Kuki Naga, aka Kukish, includes Karbi, Meitei, and Mru.
James Matisoff, in 1978, modified Benedict's classification by including Semitic languages and demoting Karen. He classified Sino-Tibetan into groups based on word order. Baik and Karenic languages have SVO, subject-verb-object, order, while the remaining branches have SOF, subject-object-verb, order.
Matisoff's classification divides Sino-Tibetan into Chinese and Tibeto-Burman, with the latter split based on geographical and linguistic proposals into groups like Kamarupan, Himalayish, Kyanjik, and Lu Burmese Naxi, among others.
Bradley, in 2002, built on Benedict's work and incorporated newer data. He classified Sino-Tibetan languages into 5 groups: Western Bodic, which includes Tibetan and Himalayish languages, and others like the Eastern Group, Kiranti, and Western Group with languages like Nuer, Chepang, Magar, Tongmi, and Baram.
Bradley also identified groups like South languages, Central languages, Northeastern, and Southeastern groups. It's fascinating how these classifications reveal the linguistic diversity and connections among these regions.
Indeed, understanding the classification and relationships of these languages provides deeper insights into the cultural and historical contexts of the people who speak them.
Hey, I've been diving into the works of some linguists who have extensively studied the Sino-Tibetan languages. Have you heard about Robert Schaefer and Paul Benedict's contributions?
Yes, Schaefer and Benedict were crucial in classifying the Tibeto-Burman languages. Schaefer's classification was extensive, but he couldn't complete it. Despite his belief that Chinese was part of the Sino-Tibetan family, he placed Taikei Dai within it.
Benedict joined Schaefer and together they finalized a tentative classification. They divided Sino-Tibetan into Chinese and Tibeto-Karen, with the latter including Karen and Tibeto-Burman. They identified 7 branches within Tibeto-Burman, such as Tibetan Kanuri.
That's right. Tibetan Kanuri splits into Bodish and Himalayish languages. The Bodish group includes Tibetan, Jurong, Takpa, Sangla, Mormi, and Gurung. Himalayish languages are divided into major and minor groups. Major Himalayish includes Renkas, Dharmiya, Shodangsi, and Byangsi, while minor Himalayish consists of Dorgai, Lepcha, and Magari.
Another interesting branch is Bahing Vayu. It's divided into 3 subgroups: Bahing, which includes Sunwar and Kaling; Kambu, which includes Sampang, Rungchanbung, Yaka, and Limbu; and Vayu Chepang, which includes Nuer.
The Abermiridfla group contains languages like Aka, Digaro, Miju, and Dimil. Then there's the Kashin group, which includes Luish. The Burmese Lolo group is also significant.
Yes, and the Bodo Garo, or aka Bearish group, includes languages like Naked Naga and aka Konyak. The Kuki Naga, or aka Kukish group, includes Karbi, Maitai, and Mru.
Moving on to James Matisoff, in 1978, he modified Benedict's classification by including Semitic languages and demoting Karen. He categorized Sino-Tibetan languages based on word order. Baik and Karenic languages have ins-vo subject-verb-object order, while the remaining branches have ins-off subject-object-verb order.
Matisoff divided the Sino-Tibetan family into 2 major groups, Chinese and Tibeto-Burman. Within Tibeto-Burman, he identified several groups like Kamarupan, Himalayish, Kianjik, and Lu-Burmese Naxi.
Bradley, in 2002, expanded on this by incorporating newer data. He started with Benedict's 1972 work and classified Sino-Tibetan languages into 5 groups. The Western Baltic group includes Tibetan and Himalayish languages, further divided into Eastern Kiranti and Western groups like Nuer, Chepang, Magar, Tongmi, and Baram.
Bradley also identified South languages, Central languages, Northeastern, and Southeastern groups. His classifications reveal the linguistic diversity and connections among these regions. It's fascinating to see how these classifications help us understand the cultural and historical contexts of the people who speak these languages.
Hey, I've been studying the classification of Sino-Tibetan languages, and I came across the works of Robert Schaefer and Paul Benedict. Have you heard about their contributions?
Yes, I have. Robert Schaefer spent 8 years working on the classification of Tibeto-Burman languages, but he couldn't complete it. Despite his belief and insistence from his colleagues, he placed the Chinese language within the Sino-Tibetan family, and he retained Taikei Dai within the Chinese family.
Paul Benedict joined Schaefer, and together they finalized a tentative classification of the Tibeto-Burman group. They divided Sino-Tibetan into 2 families, Chinese and Tibeto-Karen, with the latter including Karen and Tibeto-Burman. Within Tibeto-Burman, they identified 7 branches, such as Tibetan Kanuri.
That's right. Tibetan Kanuri is further divided into Bodish and Himalayish languages. The Bodish group includes Tibetan, Jurong, Takpa, Sangla, Mormi, and Gurung. The Himalayish languages are divided into two groups: Major Himalayish, which includes Renkas, Dharmiya, Chodangsi, and Biangsi, and Minor Himalayish, which includes Dorgai, Lepcha, and Magari.
Another branch is Bahingvayu, which is divided into three subgroups: Bahing, which includes Sunwar and Kaling; Kambu, which includes Sampang, Rungchenbung, Yaka, and Limbu; and Vayushapang, which includes Newer.
The Aber Meritfla group is another interesting one. It contains languages like Aka, Digaro, Miju, and Dimo. Then there's the Kishan group, which includes Luish, and the Burmese Lolo group.
The Bodo Garo or aka Barish group includes languages like Naked Naga and aka Konyak. The Kuki Naga or aka Kukish group includes Karbi, Maidai, and Ru.
Moving on to James Matisoff, in 1978, he modified Benedict's classification by including Semitic languages and demoting Karen. He classified Sino-Tibetan languages based on word order. Bank and Quranic languages have an Svo, subject-verb-object order, while the remaining branches have an Sof, subject-object-verb order.
Matisoff's classification divides the Sino-Tibetan family into two major groups: Chinese and Tibeto-Burman. The Tibeto-Burman group is further divided based on geographical and linguistic proposals into groups like Kamarupan, Himalayish, Kiangic, and Burmese Naxi.
Then there's Bradley, who in 2002 expanded on Benedict's work and incorporated newer data. He started with Benedict's 1972 work and classified Sino-Tibetan languages into 5 groups. The Western Bodic group includes Tibetan and Himalayish languages, which are further divided into Eastern and Western groups.
The Eastern group consists of Kiranti languages, while the Western group includes Nuer, Shapang, Magar, Tungmi, and Baram. Bradley also identified groups like Sao languages, Central languages, Northeastern, and Southeastern groups.
Bradley's classifications provide a detailed view of the linguistic diversity and connections among these regions. It's fascinating how these classifications help us understand the cultural and historical contexts of the people who speak these languages. Alright, moving on, we have the discussion on research, its nature, characteristics, types, research problem, how to choose the research problem, sample design, and more waiting. Let's get started.
Sure. I've been thinking a lot about research lately. It seems like such a critical activity in so many fields. Can you help me understand what research really is?
Absolutely. Research is an activity that leads individuals to find new facts and information. It assists in verifying existing knowledge and helps us question anything that is difficult to understand based on available data. It's especially important for someone who wants to be a successful manager. Knowing how to make informed decisions by following the right steps to resolve complex issues is crucial.
So, it's not just about gathering data, but also about understanding and using it effectively?
Exactly. Research is a continuous and ongoing activity across many disciplines and professions. It helps us critically assess how we work, execute policies, and give instructions in our professional lives.
How would you define research in simple terms?
In simple terms, research can be defined as a careful investigation or inquiry, especially through the search for new facts in any branch of knowledge. The term search is important because researchers are always looking for answers and can never be sure where they will find them or what they will discover.
Interesting. Does this apply to social sciences as well?
Yes, within social sciences, research emphasizes inquiry for theory building and testing and verifying existing theories. Communication research, for instance, draws from both physical and social sciences to shed new light on mass communication processes, effects, and institutional changes.
How does the process of research work?
The research process involves several steps. It starts with observing a phenomenon repeatedly from various dimensions. Researchers then collect data about this phenomenon. After collecting the data, they analyze it to draw conclusions.
So, it's about repeatedly observing something and then analyzing the data?
Exactly. For example, in learning theories, researchers observe learning processes repeatedly and collect data from these observations. Based on this data, they draw conclusions about how learning occurs.
What are the key characteristics of research?
There are several characteristics that determine whether research is free of biases, prejudices, and subjective errors. Some of the main characteristics include being generalized, controlled, rigorous, empirical, systematic, reliable, valid, employing a hypothesis, analytical, accurate, credible, and critical.
Can you explain a few of these characteristics?
Sure. Generalized research means the findings from a sample are representative of the entire population. Controlled research minimizes the effects of other variables. Rigorous research ensures that procedures are relevant, appropriate, and justified. Empirical research relies on data from real-life experiences or observations, and systematic research follows a carefully drafted procedure to optimize resource utilization.
What are the main objectives of research?
The objectives of research include gaining familiarity with a phenomenon or achieving new insights. Exploratory or formulative research, accurately describing the characteristics of a particular individual, situation, or group. Descriptive research, discovering the frequency with which something occurs or is associated with something else. Diagnostic research, and assessing hypotheses of causal relationships between factors. Hypothesis testing research.
What are research methods?
Research methods are the techniques and procedures used by researchers to conduct their studies. They include methods for collecting data, setting up relationships between data and unknowns, and calculating the accuracy of the results obtained.
What are the different types of research?
Research can be categorized in several ways: descriptive versus analytical. Descriptive research involves surveys and fact-finding inquiries to describe the state of affairs as it exists. Analytical research uses existing information to make critical evaluations. Applied versus fundamental. Applied research seeks solutions for immediate problems, while fundamental research focuses on generalizations and theory formulation. Quantitative versus qualitative. Quantitative research deals with quantities and can be measured, whereas qualitative research involves qualities and characteristics. Conceptual versus empirical. Conceptual research is related to abstract ideas or theories, often used by philosophers, while empirical research relies on experience or observation.
What about research methodology? How does it fit into all of this?
Research methodology refers to the systematic way to solve the research problem. It involves studying the various steps taken by researchers to investigate their research problems, including the logic behind these steps. It's essential for researchers to have a solid understanding of research methodology to conduct effective studies.
Finally, what makes for good research?
Good research is structured with specified steps taken in a sequence according to well-defined rules. The research should have a clear purpose, use common concepts, and be detailed enough to allow others to repeat the study. The design should be well planned, and the report should be transparent about any flaws or estimations in the procedure.
That makes sense. It sounds like good research is about being thorough, transparent, and systematic.
Exactly. It ensures that the findings are reliable, valid, and can be trusted to inform further research or practical applications.
Thanks. This has been incredibly informative. I feel like I have a much better understanding of what research entails now.
You're welcome. Research is a fascinating and crucial part of advancing knowledge and improving practices in various fields.
Can we dive deeper into research problems? What exactly is a research problem?
Sure. A research problem refers to any difficulty or uncertainty a researcher experiences within a theoretical or practical situation, prompting them to seek a solution. It's essentially the issue or topic that the researcher aims to address or answer through their study.
What are the basic features of a research problem?
There are several key features that define a research problem. Existence of difficulty. There must be an individual or a group experiencing some difficulty or problem. Objectives to be attained. There must be some goals or objectives that the researcher aims to achieve. If there are no objectives, there isn't a problem. Alternative means. There must be at least 2 alternative means or courses of action available to achieve the objectives. Without alternatives, there isn't a problem to solve. Doubt and selection. There must be some doubt or uncertainty regarding the selection of alternatives, meaning the researcher must answer questions about the relative efficiency of the possible alternatives. Environmental context. There must be some environment or context to which the difficulty is pertinent.
How should a researcher go about selecting a research problem?
Selecting the research problem is a critical task and involves several techniques. Avoid overdony subjects. Subjects that have been extensively studied should generally be avoided unless the researcher can provide a new perspective. Avoid controversial topics. Controversial subjects should typically be avoided by average researchers to minimize difficulties. Avoid narrow or vague problems. Problems that are too narrow or too vague should be avoided. Familiar and feasible subjects. The chosen subject should be familiar and feasible, ensuring that related research materials or sources are within reach. Seek expert advice. Contacting an expert or professor who is already engaged in related research can help in identifying a suitable research problem. Consider practical factors, the importance of the subject, the qualifications and training of the researcher, costs involved, and time factors should all be considered. Preliminary study. A preliminary study or feasibility study should be conducted, especially if the field of inquiry is relatively new and lacks well-developed techniques.
Moving on, what is a sample design?
A sample design is a particular plan for selecting a sample from a given population. It refers to the techniques or procedures that a researcher would adopt in selecting items for the sample before data collection begins.
What are the different types of sample design?
There are primarily two types of sample designs. Probability sampling. This type is based on the concept of random selection, where every member of the population has a known, non-zero chance of being included in the sample. Non-probability sampling. This type does not rely on random selection, and the probability of including each member of the population in the sample is not known. This approach is often used when random sampling is not possible or practical.
Could you provide some examples of these sampling methods?
Sure. Probability sampling methods. Simple random sampling. Every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Stratified sampling. The population is divided into subgroups, strata, based on certain characteristics, and samples are taken from each stratum. Systematic sampling. Every nth member of the population is selected. Non-probability sampling methods. Convenience sampling. Samples are taken from a group that is conveniently accessible to the researcher. Judgmental or purposive sampling. The researcher uses their judgment to select members who are most beneficial to the study. Quota sampling. Samples are taken to meet a predefined quota related to specific characteristics of the population.
That's really comprehensive. Understanding these methods can really help in designing an effective study.
Absolutely. A well-designed sample is crucial for the accuracy and reliability of research findings.
Thanks. This has been incredibly informative. I feel much more confident about understanding and tackling research problems and designing samples for a study.
You're welcome. Research is a meticulous process, but with the right knowledge and approach, it can be very rewarding.